Everyone envied me for having a perfect brother who spoiled me like a princess. Until that day, I found something I shouldn't have seen in his cell phone albums. Nude photos taken through the bathroom door, intimate videos hidden in the clouds, and a diary entry that read, "I'm going to possess her forever." It turns out that all the pampering from childhood was a carefully woven cage. When I tried to resist, he choked my waist and sneered, "Do you think mom and dad will believe you, or me?" The ending of this forbidden love is far crazier than you can imagine. Everyone envies me for having a handsome and gentle older brother. No one knows what he did to me when he was 16 years old. My mom jokingly said that she would marry me off to my brother, and the whole family laughed. My brother also looked at me tenderly and chimed in, saying, "Sure." None of them noticed that under the table, my calves were trembling continuously. The doctor said that my mom's health was not good and she couldn't have any more children. So my parents went to an orphanage and adopted a baby who had been abandoned at the hospital entrance. Finally, the baby was called Ethan. When Ethan was 3 years old, my parents had me. They didn't expect to have their own child again and were so excited that they lost their heads for a while. On the day I was born, the whole family forgot about Ethan's existence and left him alone at home. It wasn't until the next day, when my dad came home to get a pacifier for me, that he found Ethan curled up on the sofa. He hadn't eaten for a whole day. Since I could remember, I had heard my mom constantly nagging him, "You have to take good care of your sister. Your sister is the most vulnerable and important person in our family. You must help her. You're a man, and you have to let your sister have her way all the time." Ethan really listened to my mom. He had always let me have my way since we were kids, doted on me, and took great care of me. I also liked my brother the most when I was a child. I always liked to follow him around. Wherever he went, I wanted to go, and whatever he did, I wanted to do too. When I was 3 years old, my brother was going to start primary school. I wanted to go with him, but my parents wouldn't let me. I couldn't see him all day, so I cried so much that I couldn't eat. My parents felt sorry for me, so they let Ethan come back from school at noon every day to take care of me. The school was far from home. Ethan came back at 12 o'clock and had to go back at 1:30. Sometimes he didn't even have time to finish his lunch. In those years, what I looked forward to the most was growing up quickly. As long as I grew up, I could go to school with him and see him all day long. When I actually went to school and tasted the hardship of studying, I realized how naive I was. But Ethan didn't seem to think it was hard. He had always been good at studying since he was a child. I struggled to get to the middle of the class in exams, but he never studied at home and yet always got the first place in the grade. My parents asked him to help me with my studies. After school, on weekends, during winter vacation, and summer vacation, when his classmates asked him to go out and play, my parents never let him go. They just asked him to stay at home and accompany me to study. When I was in the 3rd grade, once my parents were both out, I got bored with studying, so I pestered him to take me out to play. Ethan hesitated for a long time, but finally nodded. He took me to a nearby park, held my hand, and we stood on the basketball court watching some older boys play basketball. I saw that his feet were moving along with the ball. He must have really wanted to go and play, so I pushed him onto the court. "Then don't run around." Ethan squatted down and seriously told me. I nodded vigorously. When he got on the court, I realized that he played basketball really well, and the smile on his face when he played basketball was something I had never seen at home. At home, he was always quiet, sensible, and serious, like a little adult. When he stood on the basketball court, he really smiled happily and freely. I was happy when Ethan was happy. He made a beautiful 3-pointer, and I happily went up to cheer for him. At that moment, one of the boys on the court just happened to fall out of the court. I couldn't dodge in time and was knocked down hard. "Lily," I heard Ethan shouting my name and running over in a panic. His voice was even a little shaky. I had a big scrape on my knee, and blood kept seeping out. I had never been hurt so seriously since I was a child, so I hugged my leg and cried so hard that I was out of breath. Ethan quickly carried me home on his back. When my parents came home and saw that I was hurt, they were really angry. They scolded Ethan. I saw through the crack of the door that my dad even raised his hand to hit him, and he hit really hard. I endured the pain in my knee and rushed out to stop my dad. I kept saying that it was all my fault, that I had pestered him to go out, and that I hadn't stood properly. My dad still wanted to get around me to hit him, but he was afraid of hurting my wound, so he stopped and carried me back to the bed. From then on, I never saw Ethan play basketball again. I begged him to go, but he wouldn't. When it came to the junior high school entrance exam, Ethan easily got into the best junior high school in our area. He even got the first place in the entrance exam. But that school was too far from home, and he had to live in the dormitory. My parents didn't want him to go. The reason was that it was not convenient for him to take care of me. I told my parents that I didn't need his care and that they should just let my brother go. My parents said that I didn't understand. They said that I was being generous now, but I would definitely regret it later. They said that I would definitely be crying and begging for my brother later. No matter what I said, they wouldn't listen. In the end, Ethan still went to a junior high school near home, so he could come back at noon and in the evening every day. I felt really sorry for Ethan. He had such good grades, but he couldn't go to the best school because of me. When I privately said sorry to him, I couldn't help crying. Ethan squatted down, gently wiped away my tears, and told me it was okay, that it wasn't my fault. He also took my hand and said he would take me to buy ice cream. I buried my head in his thin and youthful chest and cried silently. At that time, I thought he was the best brother in the world. When I finally got into junior high school, I found that Ethan was a bit of a well-known figure in the school. Every time Ethan came to pick me up and take me home, there would be a group of girls deliberately gathering around me, waiting to see Ethan. Your brother is so handsome and has good grades. If he were my brother, I'd be over the moon, they would say to me. I also thought Ethan was handsome, but I couldn't really say exactly what made him handsome. He held my hand and we walked home. I secretly peeked at his face from the side. He noticed my gaze and gave me a gentle smile. My brother was really good looking. I was really proud. Lily, are there any students in your class who are in a relationship? He asked casually. I got excited when he mentioned this. I counted on my fingers and told him about several couples in our class. Some were secretly holding hands under their desks. Some walked around the track together after school. Some made appointments to go out on weekends, and I heard they even hugged. He stopped and looked at me seriously. You're not doing any of these things, are you? My face suddenly turned hot. I wished I was. The guy the first had a crush on didn't even know that I liked him yet. I reluctantly told Ethan about my crush on the god in our class. I said his name was Alex, that he had really good grades, was really handsome, and played basketball better than anyone in the class. There were a lot of girls in the class who liked him, but he was nice to everyone. I lowered my head and played with my fingers. I said, but I think he's the nicest to me. He stays with me when I'm on duty, helps me move the desks, and even chats with me online on weekends. I felt a bit embarrassed for taking his bed. Ethan smiled magnanimously and didn't hold it against me. After Ethan entered high school, although he could still go home every day, his study tasks became heavier, and he didn't have the time to pick me up from school every day anymore. My heart started to itch again, mainly because Alex had become more and more handsome, and I was now sure that he really liked me. Alex and I added each other's contact information back, and we chatted until midnight every day. He said that he had liked me as soon as he saw me, but there had always been a guy picking me up from school, and he thought that guy was my boyfriend. He said that he had been secretly sad for a long time. I laughed so hard. I said, why didn't you ask me earlier? That's my brother. He was silent for a while and then asked me, your biological brother? I said, although he's not my biological brother, we grew up together, and our relationship is just like that of biological siblings. He actually sent a confused emoji and said, really? I said, of course. Alex directly invited me to go out and watch a movie on the weekend. I was overjoyed and tossed and turned all night, hardly able to fall asleep. Ethan also had classes on Saturday, so Alex and I made an appointment for Saturday. As long as I got home before he finished school, he wouldn't find out that I had gone out. After Ethan left the house, I quickly jumped up, tried on clothes in front of the mirror for a long time, and even secretly put on a bit of the lipstick my mom had left at home. I thought I was extremely beautiful, almost as if I and Ethan were from the same mother. I went out full of joy to meet Alex. The two of us went to the park, shopped in the mall, had a meal together, and watched a movie. In the middle of the movie, Alex secretly took my hand. I was so nervous that my heart almost jumped out of my chest. He quietly whispered in my ear, Lily, be my girlfriend. I had been looking forward to this sentence for almost 3 years. Afraid that he couldn't see clearly in the dark, I nodded frantically. He was amused by me. He held my hand tightly throughout the whole movie. We spent the whole day together. It was not until Ethan was about to finish his evening self-study that Alex sent me back. Your brother is so strict with you? Alex was a bit curious. I've never seen a brother be so strict with his sister. I said that my brother was a top student and he was especially afraid that it would affect my studies. Alex smiled and said, who isn't a top student? From now on, I'll be in charge of your studies. I liked Alex's confident look. He walked me to the downstairs of my house. Taking advantage of the darkness, he asked if he could hug me. Of course he could. Actually, I had been looking forward to it for a long time. He awkwardly pulled me into his arms. My heart was filled with joy. Lily. He called my name softly and looked at me deeply. He lowered his head and kissed me. I clumsily responded to him. We kissed until our faces were red, and then we looked at each other and giggled. Lily. A cold voice interrupted us, making my heart skip a beat in fright. I quickly turned my head. Ethan's slender figure stood in the darkness of the street corner, looking coldly at the two of us. At that moment, I thought Ethan was going to rush up and hit Alex. His expression had never been so gloomy and cold. I instinctively stood in front of Alex to protect him. His gaze swept over us, and his eyes became even colder. It made my calves tremble. Alex smiled and put his arm around my shoulder. He nodded at Ethan and extended his hand. "You must be Lily's brother. I'm her boyfriend. My name is Alex." Ethan stepped out of the shadows, his face polite and gentle, just like he usually was. I even doubted that the fierce look on his face just now was just my imagination. He actually shook hands with Alex and said with a smile, "I've heard Lily mention you." Alex firmly put his arm around me and said seriously, "I know what you're worried about, Ethan. Lily and I are about to take an exam, and we definitely won't let it affect our studies. I have good grades, and I can also help Lily." Ethan still smiled gently and nodded. "Okay, then I'll leave her to you." Alex happily pulled me into his arms. "Thank you, Ethan. I will definitely treat Lily well. I've liked her for a long time, and I'm serious about it." I didn't expect Ethan to be so reasonable, and I let out a sigh of relief. Blushing in Alex's arms, I softly said, "Thank you, brother." Ethan let out a barely audible, sound. His gaze seemed to be on me, but also seemed to be looking past me at something else. I spent every weekend with Alex. I wanted to spend more time with him, strolling around and holding hands. It would be even better if we could hug and kiss every day. But Alex always urged me to study with him, as if he were my private tutor. I suspected that he didn't want me as a girlfriend but as a study partner. I got angry with him. He hugged me and coaxed me, saying that he had talked to my brother. If Alex could help me get into a top high school, Ethan would fully support our relationship. He could also put in a good word for Alex in front of our parents and help us out. Alex said softly, "Lily, I really want to be with you forever. There are still 2 months left. Let's work hard together, okay?" Getting into a top high school so that I could be with Alex forever seemed like a good deal. I had never studied so hard before. With Alex supervising me every day, my grades improved rapidly. I went from being in the top of my class to being in the top of the grade. Even my head teacher was shocked by me. She praised me in the class meeting, saying, "Look at Lily. She listens to the teacher and doesn't have a relationship. She focuses on her studies wholeheartedly, and look how much progress she's made." I laughed so hard. I had actually made such great progress because I wanted to have a long-term relationship with Alex. 2 months passed quickly, and the results of the high school entrance examination came out. I firmly got into a top high school in the city. I was overjoyed when I got the results and quickly called Alex. Alex smiled reluctantly, and his voice sounded weak. He said, "Congratulations, Lily, but I failed the exam. Let's break up." The night before the high school entrance examination, while students were having evening self-study at the top high school in the city, Alex's sister, Sarah, jumped off the top floor of the teaching building. Alex's whole family was in a state of shock. Alex stayed in the hospital with her all night. 2 hours before the exam started, Sarah passed away due to ineffective rescue. Given Alex's state at that time, it was already remarkable that he could go to the exam room and finish the exam. After learning about this, I kept calling Alex. I wanted to be with him, hug him, and comfort him, but I couldn't get through to his phone no matter what. I secretly went to Sarah's funeral. In the black and white photo, the sister looked like a delicate little white flower, smiling quietly. I watched Alex from a distance at the funeral. He had lost a lot of weight and looked extremely haggard. The confident and outstanding young man seemed to have died. I cried under the covers every night. My parents came back from their business trip abroad, and I didn't dare to cry too loudly, for fear that they would hear me. I held back my sobs under the covers and was almost out of breath from crying. I didn't know when Ethan came into my room. He lifted the covers and handed me water and wiped my tears. He sat on the edge of my bed, looking down at me with his eyes lowered, and gently stroked my hair. He said softly, "Is it really that painful?" I trembled and tugged at his sleeve. Through my tears, I asked Ethan, since Sarah was his classmate, did they know why Sarah suddenly committed suicide? Ethan shook his head. He got into my bed and gently pulled me into his arms, stroking my back one after another. I was so tired from crying that I gradually became drowsy in his arms. I felt a burning breath on my ear, accompanied by a soft sigh. The next day, at the dinner table, my parents naturally brought up this topic. My mom whispered that she heard the girl jumped off the building because she was heartbroken. My mom told the story vividly, with her eyebrows dancing. She said that she heard the girl had a mysterious boyfriend in the past 2 months and was so bewitched by him that her words and deeds had been abnormal during these 2 months. Then my mom leaned in and asked Ethan, "Do you know who that guy is?" Ethan calmly put down his chopsticks and said, "Sarah was very introverted and always kept to herself. Even if she was really in a relationship, no one would know." He picked up the bowl and smiled, saying, girls like her, who are insecure and lack love inside, are easily manipulated. Looking at his smile, I suddenly felt something was strange. Lily, did you hear that? My dad glared at me and knocked on the table, saying, if you dare to have a relationship early, I'll get rid of that guy. My family has a very traditional view on relationships. In our family, we believe that young people should focus on their studies first. That's why my dad reacted so strongly when he thought I might be in a relationship. Before I could say anything, Ethan had already spoken. He smiled gently and said, Lily won't. Lily is so good. He looked at me, with the tone of coaxing a child, and said, right? I got into the same top high school as Ethan, and Ethan was about to enter his senior year of high school. To reward me and also to let Ethan relax a bit, my parents arranged a 7-day trip to Hawaii for the two of us. I didn't want to go. During this period, I couldn't get in touch with Alex. I wanted to stay at home. In case he needed me, he could come to me. But Ethan said that my current state was too obvious, and it was easy for my dad to notice if I stayed at home. It would be better to go away for a few days. If I wanted to come back, we could end the trip at any time, and he would accompany me back. I thought it made sense. I watched Ethan humming softly while washing the dishes and felt that something was more and more off. Ethan hadn't had such a relaxed expression for a long time. I stood there and watched for a long time. Finally, I realized what was strange. I looked up at him and said, brother, your classmate died. Aren't you sad at all? Ethan paused, thought for a while, and then calmly said to me, actually, sometimes death is a relief. I didn't understand. When you're dead, you have nothing. How could it be a relief? Ethan then continued slowly, Sarah's family has a very serious preference for boys over girls. Since she was a child, her parents only had eyes for Alex. No matter how good or excellent Sarah's grades were, she couldn't get their attention. Sarah couldn't possibly hate her own younger brother, could she? Over the years, she actually had psychological problems. She might have wanted to use death to get her parents' final attention. A scornful smile appeared on Ethan's lips, and he continued, it's not so bad. Look how sad her parents are. If she knew in the afterlife, she might think her death was worth it. I had been doted on by my parents since I was a child. Although my dad had become very irritable in the past few years, he had never really been mean to me or hit me. I couldn't understand this kind of emotion, but somehow, I felt that Ethan could understand it. A chill rose in my heart. When we got to Hawaii, I didn't have much of a mood to play. Since my parents weren't with us and it was just Ethan and me, I didn't have to pretend to be happy either. I almost slept all the way during the trip. If Ethan hadn't dragged me here and there, I could really have stayed in the hotel for 7 days. When we got to the ancient town, Ethan and I wandered aimlessly. A little boy of about 7 or 8 years old stopped us and said that we, as a young couple, looked so well matched. We were just like the legendary perfect couple, like celestial beings. Your girlfriend is so beautiful. It would be a pity not to give her flowers. The little boy sighed. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Could this kid really mistake a pair of siblings for a couple and try to make some money out of it? Ethan was also amused. He smiled contentedly, gave all his change to the boy, and got a big bouquet of flowers in return. Then he handed the flowers to me. I took the flowers casually and sniffed them. The chaotic mixture of scents was so pungent that it made me sneeze. Ethan smiled and gently stroked my head. In the evening, we found a bar by a small river, ate some local snacks, and listened to people playing the piano and singing. I heard that bars in Hawaii are the most suitable places for having a casual romantic encounter. I propped my head up and watched for a long time. Sure enough, everyone quickly paired up. Ethan was in high spirits and even went to the bar counter to order a song. I was bored and played with my phone. Suddenly, a stylishly dressed girl walked towards me through the crowd. She winked at me and said, "Little sister, is the person sitting opposite you your boyfriend?" I was taken aback for a moment and asked her what was up. She smiled ambiguously and said that if he wasn't my boyfriend, could she borrow him for one night? I was stunned. Then I looked at the girl. From head to toe, she was dressed in gaudy and tacky clothes. Her makeup was so thick that it was hard to tell her age, and the smell of her perfume was so strong that it was choking. I heard that at school, even the most beautiful girl in the school had chased after Ethan, and there were countless girls who had a crush on him. I truly thought that she didn't deserve Ethan. Ethan was holding 2 glasses of wine and making his way through the crowd towards us. He had grown quite tall without my noticing. He should be at least 6 feet 1 inch. He had already fully developed into an adult's figure, looking slender, tall, handsome, and gentle. I smiled at the girl and said, "You miscalculated. He already has a girlfriend. You should find another target." The girl gave me a dirty look and swayed away. Ethan sat back down and asked me who that person was. I thought it was funny, so I told him what had happened. He was lost in thought for a moment, and there was a strange look in his eyes. He handed me the glass of wine. Just as I was about to take a sip, my phone rang. It was Alex. Alex was finally calling me. My heart started pounding wildly. Without having time to say anything to Ethan, I quickly ran outside the bar to answer the phone. The moment I heard his voice, I burst into tears. Alex's voice on the phone seemed both near and far, coming in fragments. He said that his whole family was moving to a neighboring state. His parents were going to sell their house because they couldn't stand the reminders of Sarah. Moreover, Alex had done very poorly in this exam and could only go to the neighboring state to try repeating the grade. They had already made the arrangements. Alex finally smiled at me and said, "Lily, I can't accompany you in high school. It's my fault. I didn't keep the promise we made. It's okay if you don't wait for me in high school, and it's okay if you like someone else." He smiled through his tears and said, "But Lily, I really love you so much. Can you wait for me in college? I will definitely catch up with you." I hid in the corner of the ancient town and cried my heart out. In the end, I agreed to him. It was just 3 or 4 years of being apart. I wasn't afraid. When I hung up the phone, Ethan was waiting for me under the eaves of the bar. I didn't know if he had heard my phone call. If he had, I would feel a bit embarrassed, letting him see his little sister crying and insisting on being with her boyfriend. But Ethan's expression was normal. He just took my hand and led me back to the bar. His hand was especially cold. It was so strange. How could his hand be that cold in July or August? When we got back to our booth, the 2 glasses of wine were still there. My mood had cleared up, and I just wanted to have some wine to relax. I picked up a glass and took a sip. It really tasted good. After finishing 1 glass, I still wanted more. I nestled in the booth, listening to the flowing stream and the folk music, and drank several more glasses. "Stop drinking, Lily. It's the first time you've drunk so much. You'll get dizzy." Ethan frowned and tried to stop me. I giggled and clinked my glass with his. "Brother, I haven't been this happy for a long time. Just have a few more drinks with me." He somehow brought another glass. The color of the liquid in it looked different from the previous wine. "This is a specialty of this bar. Do you want to try it?" His voice was low and seductive. I took the glass and took a sip, but I couldn't drink any more. It tasted bitter and astringent, really strange. It was the first time I had drunk so much. My head was spinning badly, and my heart was pounding wildly. I watched as the lights flickered and the moonlight was hazy. Ethan's shadow seemed to split into 3. He seemed to stand up, slowly sat down next to me, leaned over, and softly said in my ear, "Are you drunk?" I was so drunk that I instinctively leaned against him. My body was burning hot, and only his body was cold. I felt dizzy and nauseous, and I was completely groggy. I had a dream. I dreamed that Alex had traveled a long way to the ancient town to find me and said that he wanted to spend a good night with me. He patiently and gently helped me back to the hotel. At first, we just talked. In the end, the corners of his eyes were flushed, and he held me tightly in his arms. My heart was fluttering. I looked up and coquettishly asked him why he didn't kiss me. He hugged me even tighter immediately, and his voice was dry and low. "Do you want me to kiss you?" I nodded. Of course, I had missed his kiss for a long time. Then he leaned in, but it wasn't as gentle and lingering as Alex's kisses usually were. Instead, he bit my lips viciously, as if deliberately trying to make me feel pain. His voice was a bit hoarse and trembling, and there was even a hint of laughter in it. He said, "Lily, you brought this on yourself." I tried to push him away with all my strength, but I couldn't. When we are lost in passion, his hands also started to behave inappropriately. When that hand really reached in, the coldness made me shiver, and I regained a bit of clarity in an instant. I looked up. There was no Alex. It was Ethan looking down at me intently. There was so much desire and possessiveness in his eyes. I panicked and pushed him away with all my might. I looked at him in disbelief, my voice trembling. "Brother?" The heat in Ethan's eyes immediately faded, as if changing his expression. His face returned to its gentle and helpless look. "Lily, you're too drunk." He tried to get closer to me, but I quickly took 2 steps back. My mind went blank, and I mechanically touched my lips. "Did we?" I forced the words out. "Kiss?" Ethan hesitated for a moment but still nodded. A feeling of nausea instantly spread throughout my body. I rushed to the bathroom and retched over the sink. Ethan followed me in, gently patting my back and handing me water. The moment his hand touched my back, I felt as if I had been electrocuted, and it was extremely uncomfortable. I forced a smile and pushed him away. I said, "I'm sorry, brother. I drank too much. Don't take it to heart. I'm so sorry." He obediently let me push him. When he reached the door, he turned back and looked at me worriedly. "Get some rest." I forced a smile and nodded, then closed the door. I stood at the door for a long time, then trembled and locked the door gently. Then, as if I had finally woken up from a dream, I slumped to the ground. How could I have mistaken Ethan for Alex? I had never been drunk before. I didn't know if when you drank too much, you would feel so hot all over, like a person who was extremely thirsty and craving a glass of water. I thought of those hands that had squeezed my waist so hard and shuddered. If I hadn't come to my senses, I didn't know what terrible thing would have happened. Even if I was drunk and asked Ethan for a kiss, how could he have agreed? He must have been drunk too. After this happened, I didn't have the mood to stay there any longer. Ethan accompanied me back ahead of time, to let me rest well after the hangover. Ethan booked a small sleeper cabin. Although Ethan and I still seemed close on the surface, every time he got close to me, I would instinctively dodge. Throughout the journey, I tried to avoid any contact with him. I felt awkward whenever he touched me. Even when he just looked at me, I felt uncomfortable all over. While I was lost in thought, he handed me a glass of water, and I was so startled that I knocked the glass over. The hot water inside spilled all over his hand. He winced in pain from the burn, but he still quickly grabbed my hand, worried about whether I was okay. I instinctively pulled my hand away. He was taken aback for a moment and forced a smile at me, saying it was okay and that he would go and deal with the burn. I watched his lonely back, and a feeling of guilt welled up inside me. He was the brother who had doted on me and loved me since I was a child. I was the one who stubbornly insisted on drinking so much, and I was the one who begged him for the kiss. How could I treat him like this? The more I thought about it, the more I felt that I was a terrible person. I bit my hand and cried under the covers. He came back to the cabin, pulled me out from under the covers, held me in his arms, and gently patted my back. It's okay, brother is here, he said softly. I won't tell anyone. Let's just pretend this never happened, okay? After we got home, although I tried my best to control myself, I still avoided him both explicitly and implicitly. After the school started, Ethan's grades plummeted. He had originally been the first in the grade, but now he had dropped out of the top 100. It was no wonder. Although Ethan's tasks in his senior year of high school were so intense, he still focused all his attention on me, spending a lot of time accompanying me, comforting me, and carefully taking care of my emotions. How could he not be affected? The call from Ethan's head teacher reached my dad. My dad came back specifically and gave Ethan a good beating, making the corner of his mouth bleed. My dad couldn't believe it and roared at Ethan. Why couldn't you have your problems at any other time? Why did it have to be in your senior year? Ethan still had that calm look on his face. He lowered his head and admitted his mistake, without explaining anything. Tell me properly, what on earth is the reason? My dad put down the stick and sat down, as if for the first time he wanted to hear Ethan's reason. Ethan glanced at me. I felt a chill run through me from head to toe in an instant. But in the end, Ethan didn't say anything. He just silently said that it was all his fault and that he would work hard in the future. My dad laughed and rolled up his sleeves. You won't say, huh? I'll beat you to death right now. At that moment, my dad's eyes were like those of a fierce beast. I cried and went up to block him. My dad pushed me aside and viciously beat Ethan. Ethan gritted his teeth and didn't say a word. He didn't even make a sound, just looking at me with his eyes fixed on me. It was all my fault. Ethan had been the purest person, only focused on studying. He had been affected like this, and yet he still wanted to protect me. It was all my fault. My dad finally calmed down, and Ethan was badly beaten. He had a high fever that didn't go away for several days. I took a leave of absence from school to take care of him at home, but he still kept smiling weakly at me, saying that I didn't need to worry and that I should go back to school. He had taken care of me for more than 10 years, but he didn't even want me to take care of him for a few days. Ethan was delirious with the fever and kept talking to me. He said that in his whole life, he hadn't liked anyone. As long as I could continue to be happy, he would be content in this life. My heart ached when I heard this. My brother was too good to me, so good that I couldn't bear it. Forgive your brother, okay? Your brother really didn't mean it, he said hoarsely with the fever, still asking for my forgiveness. It was clearly my fault. As I wiped his sweat and my own tears, I felt that I was really a very bad person. If you forgive your brother, just hug him, okay? Ethan looked at me weakly, his voice pleading. I suppressed the discomfort in my heart and gently nestled into his arms. He stroked my head and let out a contented sigh. Good sister, my good sister. From then on, I never dared to show any rejection towards Ethan again. Even if there was still a little bit of awkwardness in my heart, I tried my best to bury it deep in the bottom of my heart. Ethan seemed very happy. When he was happy, my mood also improved. It seemed that we had really returned to our previous way of getting along. Both Ethan's and my study conditions got better. Ethan's grades were gradually improving. Now he even had to attend classes for half a day on Sundays. He was under a lot of pressure, and I didn't want to cause him any trouble because of my own concerns. Moreover, it was just that one thing. We weren't biological siblings after all. Just think of it as having a casual romantic encounter during a trip, just kissing a stranger. It's not a big deal, right? On Sunday, while I was studying, my brother Ethan's head teacher knocked on the door. She was a bit surprised to see that I was the only one at home. She said she was here for a home visit. Since my parents weren't around, she thought it would be better to forget it. I quickly invited her in and said I could convey the message to my parents. The head teacher looked a bit distracted. She took out Ethan's exam papers and showed them to me. She said that in his previous exam, the processes were all correct, but the answers were all wrong. It seemed that he had made the mistakes on purpose. Has something happened to your brother recently? His state of mind doesn't seem right. The head teacher frowned deeply. This is his senior year of high school. He should take it seriously and not have any wrong ideas. After seeing the head teacher off, I was a bit confused. She said that Ethan had deliberately performed poorly in the exam, that he had deliberately controlled his scores. How could that be possible? Ethan surely knew that if he did poorly in the exam, he would definitely be severely punished by our dad. Did he just want to get beaten up? I couldn't figure it out no matter how hard I thought. When Ethan came back, I quickly told him about it. He shook his head and smiled, looking a bit helpless. He said that the head teacher became nervous and suspicious when it came to senior year. How could anyone deliberately perform poorly in an exam? I thought so too. Ethan's college entrance examination results came out. As expected, he did extremely well. He could have gone to some of the best universities in the country, but he chose to stay in our city. I really couldn't understand it, but Ethan said that the major he liked happened to be top-notch in this school. My parents were happy and said that it was just right for him to stay and take care of me. At the dining table, I forced a smile. Actually, I didn't want him to take care of me anymore. Although I had been restraining myself, the events of that night always came to mind, making me feel uncomfortable all over. We could never go back to the way we were before. After Ethan entered college, he didn't live in the dormitory and still came home almost every day. As soon as he saw me, he would tell me how great his university was and that it would be the best if I could also get in. But I didn't want to go. I had made an agreement with Alex that we would both go to a university in another province and study at the same university so that we could be together. I didn't know why, but looking at Ethan's expectant eyes, I didn't dare to tell him. Also, I always felt that Ethan looked at me in a strange way. Sometimes, while I was studying, I suddenly felt uncomfortable all over and my heart would tremble. When I looked up, I would definitely see Ethan staring at me. That gaze was very different from his previous ones. It was a gaze filled with admiration, scrutiny, longing, and desire. It was the way a man looked at a woman, not the way a brother looked at his sister. Under that gaze, I felt like I was under a microscope, with no place to conceal myself. Alex also successfully got into a top high school in another province. He was in his sophomore year, and I was in my senior year. Although our grades weren't as good as Ethan's, they were enough for us to get into our dream school. I missed him a lot. During the long school vacation, I wanted to go and see him. Just then, Ethan's club had a big event, and he said he would be too busy to go home. Alex was overjoyed when he knew I was going. We talked on the phone until the early morning, planning all the places to eat, play, and stay. We can also go camping, Alex suggested. I hesitated. Is that a good idea? With just one tent, how would we stay? Alex smiled in an ambiguous way and said in a low voice, "You don't trust me that much?" My face turned red immediately, and I said softly, "I don't feel at ease." Alex stopped smiling and said seriously, "It won't be like that, Lily. I respect you 100%. If you're worried, we won't go. We can do other things instead." Alex understood me, respected me, truly loved me. My heart felt like it was soaked in a warm pool of water. "Then let's go," I said in a low voice. Alex laughed on the other end of the phone. After hanging up the phone, my heart was pounding with excitement. I was really looking forward to the vacation trip. I was so eager. After all, I hadn't seen him for more than 2 years. I tried to calm down my mood and went outside to get some water before going to bed. As soon as I opened the door, I was so shocked that cold sweat broke out on my back in an instant. Ethan was standing straight outside my door. The lights were off, and his face looked gloomy and terrifying in the darkness. My heart started pounding wildly in fear. I let out a sigh of relief, turned on the light, and glared at him in a complaining manner. "What are you doing here? Sleepwalking in the middle of the night?" Ethan didn't answer. He just looked at me calmly. There were countless complex emotions in his eyes. I felt scared being looked at by him and became nervous again. After a long time, he let out a sigh and looked at me with great helplessness. He said, "Lily, what do I have to do for you to give him up?" I was stunned. "What?" I asked blankly. He didn't answer. He walked towards me step by step. That gaze made it hard for me to breathe. My heart was pounding, and I turned around and ran. I slammed the door shut and tried to lock it, but my fingers were trembling so much that they wouldn't obey me. He was very strong and pushed the door open with one push. He turned off the light as he entered. In the darkness, he pressed me against the wall tightly and asked me in a wild tone, "Why are you so stubborn? Haven't I done enough? How long has he been good to you? And how long have I been good to you?" I couldn't move, and my mind was in chaos. The fog that had haunted me for years finally lifted, revealing an ugly truth that was too terrifying to look at directly. Ethan stared into my eyes, his eyes wide with anger, and said word by word, "Lily, I've loved you for 10 years. Brother." I tried to push him away with all my strength, but he didn't move at all. I had never seen Ethan like this before. I was so scared that my whole body was shaking. "Stop calling me brother." He held my hands tightly and said viciously, "How long do you want to use that word to stop me?" I looked at him in horror and kept screaming, as if trying to wake up a madman. "Brother, I'm your sister, Em." He covered my mouth tightly with his hand. "Be quiet." His face was very close to mine, and there was mockery in his eyes. "Actually, you kind of knew, right? You just didn't dare to face it." Ethan smiled sadly. "It's been 10 years. If you didn't know it all, you'd be a fool." I opened my eyes wide. The thin veil of warmth that had covered those memory fragments in the past, and the false appearances that had been masked by family love but were actually desires were instantly shattered. I suddenly calmed down as if I had finally woken up from a long dream. "Ethan, let me go." I stared into his eyes and said, "Let me go, and we can talk properly." Ethan laughed softly. "It's too late." He pinched my chin and lifted my face up, his voice cold with a hint of a smile. "How many times has he kissed you? I bent down, and the tip of my tongue tasted the flavor of blood. "I'm going to get it back one by one." His voice was hoarse, like a devil's chant. It was disgusting. Really disgusting. I bit him and pushed him away with all my strength. Ethan's back hit the wall hard. He slowly wiped the blood from his lips with the back of his hand and smiled wickedly. "Don't be so nervous. You're about to take the college entrance examination. I won't do anything to you." I laughed. My brother was really considerate. He really is my gentle and good brother. "Ethan, aren't you afraid that I'll tell Dad?" I looked at him hatefully. "Do you think he'll beat you to death?" "You won't, Lily," he said softly, returning to his gentle and considerate appearance like a vampire that had just had its fill. "You remember that Mom has a bad heart, right?" I was suddenly shocked, and a wave of panic rose in my heart. "You don't want Mom to be so angry about our business that it kills her, do you?" He led me to sit on the sofa, looked at me patiently, and said in a soft voice, "Of course, you won't tell Alex either. You don't want anyone to know that you're involved with your own brother, do you?" Ethan leisurely flipped through the photo album on his phone, then swiped out a photo and showed it to me. It was taken in a hotel in the ancient town. Ethan and I were pressed closely together, passionately kissing. We looked like a shameless couple. "Did you drug me?" I asked blankly. The most absurd speculation had now become the only answer. Ethan calmly put away his phone. "What drug?" He looked at me in confusion. "Isn't this proof that we were deeply in love and couldn't control ourselves?" He smiled, and there was so much malice in his smile. "You don't want me to send this photo to Mom, Dad, and Alex, do you?" I was trembling all over. If they knew, it would be hell. It would mean the destruction of our family and eternal damnation. I was silent for a long time. I looked up at him and said softly, "Brother, what are your conditions? Just say it." He stepped closer, stared at me intently, with a madness as if he wanted to tear me apart. "Break up with Alex. Okay. Never see him again. Okay. Go to the same university as me. Okay. Be with me forever." He pinched my chin again, gently wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes, and said in a complaining manner, "Look at you. You've been so disobedient recently. Do you think your brother wants to do this?" He gently pulled me into his arms and whispered in my ear with great tenderness, "It's okay. It's okay. Do you think your brother doesn't have a heartache when he sees you like this?" He picked me up and put me on his lap, just like when we were kids, and kissed away my tears. "It's all over, Lily." Alex answered my call, and his voice was very cheerful. "Lily, I've already rented the tent. I rented too, so you don't have to worry." My Alex. The best Alex. "We should break up." I tried to make my voice as cold and hard as iron. I was afraid that the slightest tremor in my voice would let him hear my reluctance. There was silence on the other end. "Lily?" He called me in confusion. "Let's break up. I've fallen for someone else," I said resolutely. Only his steady breathing could be heard in my ear. "Lily," he said calmly, "is brother Ethan beside you?" I was taken aback. I looked up and saw that Ethan was also a bit surprised. "How did you know?" Alex smiled but didn't answer my question. Instead, he said in a gentle and firm tone, "Give him the phone." I pretended to be impatient. "What do you two have to talk about?" Alex's gentleness didn't change at all. He coaxed me like a child, saying, "Be good and listen to me." I couldn't resist Alex's gentleness the most. My throat felt sour, and the tears that I had just managed to hold back flowed down again. Ethan took the phone and turned off the speakerphone. I didn't know what Alex said. All I saw was that Ethan's face turned pale instantly. Brother Ethan, you dated my sister for 2 months. Didn't you know that she has the habit of keeping a diary? Ethan was sitting in a coffee shop, looking out the window and feeling bored. His handsome profile attracted the waitresses' frequent glances, and they were all guessing whether he was waiting for his girlfriend. But the person he waited for was a young man. The young man looked a bit younger, but he was already full of vigor and his talent couldn't be hidden. They greeted each other politely and talked politely. They seemed like friendly brothers, enjoying a harmonious atmosphere. No one could ever imagine that the content of their conversation was so naked and sinful. Ethan smiled. You don't really think I'll believe you, do you? If you really had any diary, you would have sent it to the police station long ago. Why would you wait until now? Alex took a sip of coffee. You came all the way here to meet me because you believed it to some extent. He took out a flash drive and placed it in the middle of the table. This is the diary my sister wrote that I just found recently. And then? Ethan glanced at the flash drive, showing no emotion. Then I know it's you. I can figure it out. Do you think the police can figure it out too? Alex said calmly. The two of them fell silent and stared at each other intently, trying to read all the useful information from each other's eyes. After a long time, Ethan couldn't help but laugh. I guess the information in the diary can't directly convict me. Otherwise, you would have sent it to the police station directly. Your threat is useless. Do you dare to take the bet, brother? Alex smiled and put his hand on the flash drive. To be honest with you, I've looked up a lot of information. The content in it will ensure that you go to prison for at least 3 years. It could be anywhere from 3 to 10 years. I'm not sure. Then what are you waiting for? Ethan smiled faintly. Just go ahead. You have 2 possible situations. He held up one finger. The first situation is that the diary can't convict me, so your threat is invalid. He held up 2 fingers. The second situation is that the diary can convict me. After I get out in a few years, I can still go to find Lily. Wherever she is, I'll go. What can you do about it? Alex wasn't provoked. It seemed that he didn't show any emotion at all. You won't let that happen, Alex said firmly. People like you can't stand the thought of Lily escaping from your life. If you go to prison for 4 or 5 years, by the time I reach the legal age of marriage, she will marry me and have children. Can you stand that? Even if you only go to prison for 3 years, I will live with her. Can you stand that? If you go to prison for this kind of crime and Lily's mom is so angry that she dies because of you, is there still any chance for you and Lily? Ethan's smile froze. Each word hit Ethan right in the heart. He frowned and was silent for a long time. Finally, he reluctantly asked the question. What are your conditions? Alex tossed the flash drive in his hand. It's simple. You go abroad and hide for 6 or 7 years. Wait until the statute of limitations for the case passes, and then you can come back. By then, I won't be able to threaten you anymore. Alex kindly added. Oh, by the way, while you're abroad, I promise I won't touch a hair on her head. Alex looked almost sincere. There was another long silence. The frown on Ethan's face relaxed. He took a sip of coffee and said slowly, then what will you get out of it? The answer was as Ethan expected. Time, Alex said with his eyes lowered. Time to compete with you head on. He looked at his fingers. I'm 3 years younger than you. It's not fair. When you come back, let's see if you can still get her. Alex looked up with the spirit of a young man and the determination not to be outdone. Their eyes met, and they both smiled. I really didn't expect this. Alex? Ethan looked Alex up and down, as if he wanted to examine every single hair on his head. But you have a loophole. Didn't you notice it? Ethan said slowly. You could just send me to prison. Wouldn't that also give you the time you want? Why go through all this trouble? Ethan smiled maliciously, his voice low and full of temptation. She's your own sister. You grew up with her. Can you really be willing to let me go so easily? Alex lowered his head and stirred his coffee. His short bangs covered his eyes so tightly that no emotion could be seen. After a long time, he let out a soft sigh. Don't test me anymore, brother Ethan. I know exactly what kind of person you are, and you probably have an idea of what kind of person I am too. Alex looked up and smiled sincerely. My sister told you, right? My family values boys over girls. It was absurd. So absurd. Ethan couldn't help laughing with his hands over his eyes. Sarah, you really have a great brother. I just gave a little push that led to your death. Your brother is sitting right next to your grave, bargaining with me. You really died a worthwhile death. Let's be honest, brother Ethan. This time, Alex calmly held up his fingers. If I send you to prison, first of all, Lily's mom will be so angry that she dies because of you, and Lily may never be able to accept me for the rest of her life. Secondly, if you're only sentenced to 3 years, when you get out, I'll at most be on par with you. If you go abroad and stay for 5 years, I'm 100% determined to surpass you. Using one person's life to buy 2 years of time, isn't that a good deal? Alex stared at Ethan intently, his eyes shining with the same crazy and paranoia. At this moment, it was hard to tell who was human and who was a ghost. Ethan paid the bill and stood up. Before leaving, he turned back and stared at Alex coldly. You're using your sister's life to make a deal with me. How are you any different from me? It wasn't too much to strike at the heart of a person, was it? But Alex wasn't affected at all. He even grinned. Of course, there's a difference. Alex also stood up, as if he was going to politely see him off. His face was full of courtesy. The difference is that Lily likes me. Ethan's eyes darkened, and his expression was so gloomy that it was terrifying. For a moment, it almost seemed like a murderous aura. Alex didn't show any fear and met his gaze head-on. Of course, you have another solution, Alex said slowly. You can also kill me and hide my body anywhere. Take a big risk. I'm sure you're considering that right now. Ethan was seen through, but he wasn't surprised at all. He still looked at Alex coldly. If Alex could think of this, he couldn't possibly have no precautions. Sure enough, but I'm sorry. The phone I hid in the school has been set to automatically call the police. Alex smiled confidently. Please make sure I get back to school safely and on time. Ethan went abroad smoothly. He was originally on the school's recommendation list, but he had always refused to go. The counselor really liked this gentle and polite student. When he finally agreed to go, the counselor was overjoyed. As if afraid that he would change his mind, the counselor arranged the study abroad procedures very quickly. My dad also supported him. He patted Ethan on the shoulder. Go, son. Your sister might want to go abroad in the future too. You can go and explore the way for her. Then he lit a cigarette, put his arm around Ethan's shoulder, and smiled, creating an image of a loving father and obedient son. If you think the development abroad is good, you don't have to come back. My dad blew out a smoke ring, and his voice was full of expectation. Then you can bring your mom and me over there, and we can enjoy the luxurious life there too, Dad. Ethan interrupted his fantasy. I will definitely come back. My dad frowned instinctively and wanted to use his authority as a parent to teach him a lesson. But the next moment, he met Ethan's sharp gaze. That gaze wasn't that of a young one looking at an elder. It was the gaze of a younger and stronger alpha wolf looking at an old and weak wolf. It's okay to come back. My dad forced a smile, let go of his hand, and said to himself, the child is grown up. Let him make his own decisions. Ethan's luggage was packed by my mom and me. When my parents knew that Ethan was going abroad, they rushed back from the neighboring province, claiming that they wanted to spend the last bit of time with their son. I was relieved that there were people at home. Every night, I used the excuse of missing my mom to squeeze into her bed and sleep with her. Then I would lie awake all night, looking at the ceiling and listening to my mom's steady breathing, too afraid to fall asleep. On the day we sent Ethan abroad, the whole family went to the airport. When we got to the airport, my parents had an important business matter and left early. Sure enough, business was still the most important thing. It was just Ethan and me left. Ethan took a step closer, and I took a step back until I was almost falling down the stairs. Ethan smiled. In a public place. What can I do to you? I still looked at him warily. After a long time, I finally asked, why are you going abroad? Ethan looked at the bustling crowd and smiled without answering. What exactly did you and Alex talk about that day? His expectant eyes fell on me. Don't you want me to leave, sister? He smiled gently and firmly. If you say a word, I won't leave. Even if it's a sea of fire, I won't leave. How could that be possible? I couldn't wait for Ethan to go as far away as possible. I never wanted him to come back. I will definitely come back. You know that, right? He slowly took 2 steps closer, and my back hit the wall. He hugged me slowly, and his burning words fell into my ear. Lily, when I come back, no matter where you are, I will find you. At that time, you won't be able to escape from me anymore. I looked at him in fear. He savored my fear with interest, chuckled, pinched my chin, and gave me a gentle and tender kiss. Then he stepped back, adjusted my bangs for me, and stroked my head. Just like a real brother treating his sister, he seriously said the last sentence to me. Brother is leaving. His words were full of tenderness and reluctance. He turned around and left. I watched his figure pass through the boarding gate and finally disappear. I squatted on the ground, covering my face and crying loudly. Ethan, you bastard, you beast. Give me back my gentle and silent brother. Give me back the brother who has doted on me since I was a child and accompanied me day and night. The people passing by were startled by my crying and looked at me in silence, thinking that I had just sent off my lover. I was crying so hard that I was lifted up by a pair of gentle and strong hands and pulled into a warm embrace. Alex patted my back gently. It's okay. It's all over. I was crying so hard in his arms that I could barely breathe. Alex sighed with pity. You've been through a lot. I broke free from his embrace. What did Ethan talk to you about when he went to see you that day? What made him leave? I asked, as if grasping at the last straw. Alex looked into my eyes in silence and finally shook his head. I promised him that I wouldn't tell you. How did you know? I asked blankly. Ethan had always been gentle with Alex. He had never shown his crazy side to Alex. Because I was worried that Alex would look down on me. I also kept silent about it. How on earth did he? I guessed it. Alex stroked my head. I was just suspicious before. The moment you broke up with me with a crying voice, I was sure. How could you break up with me, Lily? Alex smiled at me, his smile full of confidence and tenderness. We agreed to be together forever. Did you forget? My tears welled up again, and I buried myself in Alex's arms. Suddenly, something in Alex's chest poked me. I frowned and touched it. It turned out to be a flash drive. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Who hangs a flash drive around their chest? He obediently took off the flash drive and placed it in my hand. This is the travel itinerary I made for the vacation. Do you want to take a look? I was a bit confused, but the vacation is already over. I had originally planned to go to the neighboring province to see him during the vacation, but Ethan's sudden decision to go abroad had put that plan on hold. Then we can go next time. Alex smiled. It's better to be prepared. When was he still thinking about traveling? I finally laughed through my tears. Alex quietly put his arm around me and slowly pulled me into his arms. His gentle and firm presence was like an impenetrable barrier, protecting me tightly. I was finally safe. Side story 1. Sister, you really should have written in your diary. You're so smart. Why didn't you leave some records at that time? The young man looked at the photo on the tombstone and sighed regretfully. He helplessly touched the top of the tombstone and got a handful of dust. Without evidence, even if I guessed it, I couldn't convict him. The young man looked at the girl in the photo. The girl was smiling peacefully. After a long time, the young man said softly, "But I won't let him go. He will definitely come back for Lily. Do you remember her? The girl I always told you about." When he mentioned that person, a gentle light suddenly appeared in the young man's eyes. "She's as kind and beautiful as you. I will protect her well. I will never let her follow in your footsteps." The young man looked at his hands. They were long and beautiful hands, becoming stronger and more powerful due to the accumulation of ability and experience. He approached the tombstone, squatted down, and stared intently at the person in the photo. "Sister, I will definitely send him to hell. Just wait." The young man stood up neatly and turned around to leave. The tenderness and care in his eyes were gone. All that was left was determination. It was like a warrior drawing his sword and going to the battlefield. Side story 2. Ethan, why are you still here? A colleague with blonde hair and blue eyes in the laboratory exclaimed. It's already 2 o'clock in the morning. Aren't you going back to rest? The handsome young man smiled gently. His hands were steady as he continued his experiment without stopping. I'll rest after I finish this experiment. You're so hardworking. So hardworking. The colleague watched his smooth operation and found it quite aesthetically pleasing. The colleague was amazed and silently clicked his tongue. You're already so excellent. The professor is about to recommend you to stay at the school. Why are you still working so hard? What are you aiming for? I want to go back early. A trace of gentle and tender emotion that was hard to detect appeared in the young man's eyes. He stopped his operation and looked out at the night sky, as if he wanted to see the person who was treasured in his heart through thousands of mountains and rivers. She's still waiting for me.